You think church is awkward now? Try standing in a packed courtyard while everyone watches a live goat become the nation's emotional luggage. The wind is dry, your stomach is empty, and somewhere beyond the camp is a stretch of wilderness with a name you do not love hearing out loud. Worst of all, this is not some fringe folk custom. This is the holiest day of the year. Hey guys, tonight we begin with Azazel, the demon-haunted wilderness figure waiting at the far edge of Israel's strangest ritual. We're going to stand in the dust and animal smell of the Day of Atonement, shoulder to shoulder with a hungry crowd, and watch one deeply unfortunate goat get loaded with everything nobody wants to keep. So before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in ancient Israel on the most sacred day of the year. The good news, nobody is making small talk. The bad news, that's because everybody is too nervous. You are already hungry. No breakfast, no little handful of figs, no piece of bread to take the edge off. Your stomach has that hollow, sour feeling like it is quietly filing a complaint with management, and management is God. The morning air is cool, but not in a refreshing way. It has that dry desert bite that makes your lips feel cracked before the sun is even fully up. Dust is everywhere already, because of course it is. Dust in the seams of your clothes, dust on your ankles, dust creeping between your teeth like it paid rent. You make your way toward the sanctuary with everyone else, and the crowd thickens fast. Not festival thick, not cheerful thick. Nobody is laughing, nobody is passing around snacks, and nobody has brought a tambourine to make this worse. This is the kind of crowd that breathes carefully. People press in shoulder to shoulder, all wrapped in wool and sweat and yesterday's smoke. A child whimpers, then gets hushed instantly. Somewhere nearby, somebody coughs into their sleeve. A man shifts his weight beside you, and the smell rolling off him is fasting breath, lanolin and old goat. It is not ideal. Ahead of you, the sanctuary courts are already packed. The place feels less like a serene religious moment and more like the world's most sacred bottleneck. Every eye keeps drifting toward the priests, toward the animals, toward the space where everything important is about to happen, and nobody can pretend this is normal. Because it isn't. There are days for singing, days for feasting, days for bringing your offering, doing what needs doing, and going home. This day is different. This day has the feeling of a whole nation waiting for test results. The smell hits before the meaning does. Blood, ash, singed hair, damp wool, hot animal breath. The sour edge of human bodies packed too close for too long. It all mixes together into a smell so thick it feels textured, like you could spread it on flatbread and deeply regret it. And then there are the goats. You see them before you get a good look at the high priest. Two animals standing there in the middle of all this dread, chewing occasionally and blinking with the blank confidence of creatures who have absolutely no idea they are involved in theology. Their ears twitch, their hooves scrape the ground, their pupils, those weird rectangular little windows of goat judgment, stare past you as if you are the ridiculous one. One of them is about to have a very bad day. Actually, both are having a bad day. One just has the more confusing assignment. You edge for a better look, and the dry wind pushes against your face. It carries grit and the faint smell of open country beyond the camp. That smell is different, thinner, harder, not hearth smoke, not cooking, not people, just rock, scrub, and emptiness. The kind of emptiness that makes your skin feel alert. Out there is the wilderness, not the cute modern version where someone takes a scenic hike and posts a picture of a canyon with the caption, "Needed this." No, this is biblical wilderness, harsh ground, thorn scrub, heat that will later punch you in the head, silence big enough to make a person feel extremely mortal, the place where roads get vague, shadows get strange, and civilized life just sort of gives up. And that is where one goat is going. You don't know all the details yet. Most people around you don't. They know enough to be unsettled, which is honestly worse. There will be lots cast over the goats. One for the Lord, the other for Azazel. That name moves through the crowd like a draft under a door. Azazel. People don't say it loudly. They say it the way you mention a place nobody wants to camp near. Maybe it is a being. Maybe it is the name of the waste itself, the broken land where things are sent away. Either way, it does not sound cozy. It sounds like sharp rocks, bad wind, and the feeling of being watched by absolutely nobody, which is somehow more upsetting. And this is the part that really gets you. This ritual is commanded, not tolerated, not shrugged at, not something a few weird uncles came up with in the hills. This is built right into the holiest day on the calendar, on purpose, with priests, with order, with all the solemnity in the world. You stand there trying to make this add up. The nation's sins are going onto a living goat. Then that goat is getting marched out into the wasteland, toward Azazel. You glance at the animal again, and he is, somehow, still just a goat. Dusty coat, nervous little jaw movement, a tail flick. He looks like he should be eating laundry off a line, not serving in a cosmic waste management ceremony. Yet here you all are. Nobody in the crowd appears casual about it. Faces are tight, eyes stay fixed forward. Even the usual background murmur of human gathering comes in thin and strained, like everybody is trying not to say the wrong thing on the one day of the year when wrong things feel extra expensive. The high priest is there too, stripped of glittering excess. No jeweled chest piece flashing in the sun today. No gold making him look like a walking treasure cabinet. Linen instead. Pale, severe, almost stark. It only makes the whole thing feel more serious, like heaven has requested business attire. The animals shift. Priests move. Dust rises in soft, ugly puffs around their feet. You can feel the tension building in the court, that strange mixture of ritual precision and pure human queasiness. Everyone knows something necessary is coming. Everyone also knows it is going to involve blood, confession, and one absolutely baffling goat commute into the desert. And that is where tonight begins. You are in the crowd, dry-mouthed and hungry, watching the holiest machinery in Israel start to turn. Somewhere behind incense and linen and the smell of singed offerings waits a name that belongs to the wasteland. Somewhere past the camp boundary lies a land empty enough to receive what no one wants back. And right in front of you, switching its tail and blinking in the dust, stands the poor creature expected to carry it there. The sun is barely up, and already the whole place smells like fear, smoke, and livestock. Not one smell. A whole committee of smells. Fresh blood, old blood, hot wool, damp leather, ash, dung, human breath gone sour from fasting, and the greasy sting of fat hitting flame. You try breathing shallowly, which only makes you feel dramatic and hungry. The courtyard is awake in the worst possible way. Other feast days have music, chatter, that little buzz of people pretending they enjoy being in public. This morning has none of that. This morning feels like standing in a waiting room where everyone knows the surgery is serious, and the surgeon is also your national spiritual emergency contact. You shift your weight and immediately regret it because your sandals find a patch of something slick. You do not look down. Ahead of you, priests move fast, but never look rushed. That is part of the job. You can be carrying a basin full of blood through a packed holy court, and apparently, the expectation is that you do it with the composure of a man delivering folded towels. Their feet know where to go. Their hands know what to lift. Their faces are set in that tight, controlled expression people wear when one mistake could turn into a story nobody stops telling for generations. And this day has stories attached to it already. Nobody has forgotten what happened the last time priestly enthusiasm got weird in the presence of God. Nobody in this courtyard needs a refresher on unauthorized fire. So the whole place hums with that special kind of reverence that is maybe 80% devotion and 20% raw survival instinct. You can feel it in your shoulders. Your stomach clenches again. Fasting was holy in theory. In practice, it means your insides are now a small, angry animal scratching at the walls. The smell of cooked flesh drifting from the altar is not helping. Neither is the memory of bread. Warm bread, soft bread. Bread that doesn't currently exist for you, because this is the Day of Atonement, and your appetite can file all complaints directly into the void. A woman beside you swallows hard and closes her eyes for a moment. A man in front of you rubs his beard with grim concentration, as though that might somehow improve events. Nobody asks how anyone is doing. The answer is visible. Dust clings to the hem of every robe. It settles in eyebrows, gathers in sandal straps, turns sweat into mud along the back of your neck. The morning cool is already backing away, and the first real edge of heat slides into the court. It won't be unbearable yet. Give it time. Ancient Israel is extremely patient when preparing to ruin your day. The high priest appears again, and the difference hits you harder in full morning light. No gold, no jeweled breastpiece catching the sun, no bells, no dazzling color, no glittering official splendor. Just white linen, tunic, sash, turban, breeches, simple, severe, clean in a way that makes every stain feel like a threat waiting to happen. He looks less like a royal figure now, and more like a man entering a room where everything matters and nothing can go wrong. That lands in your chest like a stone. On ordinary days, the grandeur helps. Gold says confidence. Gold says ceremony. Gold says maybe heaven has this under control. Linen says this is serious enough to strip the sparkle off. Linen says leave your decorative nonsense at the door. And now the morning tightens around the part nobody likes lingering on. Before anything major happens for the people, the high priest has to deal with himself. Which, frankly, is fair. You cannot stroll into the holiest work of the year carrying the nation's sins if your own house is still a mess. So before he handles everyone else's guilt, he comes with a bull for a sin offering on behalf of himself and his household. A bull, massive animal, broad shoulders, warm hide, breath like fermented hay, and grievance. The thing snorts, stamps once, and swings its head. Its horns are polished, Its body is expensive. Its presence says this day has entered the absolutely not a drill phase. The priests guide it forward, and the crowd watches with that awful collective stillness people get when there is no point pretending this is symbolic in some vague, airy way. This is not abstract. This is hide and muscle and blood pressure. This place is the world's holiest slaughterhouse. Everybody knows it. You hear the rustle before you see it. The high priest leans in, lays his hands on the bull, and begins confession. Not theatrical, not shouted for effect, deliberate, weighty, personal first, his own sins, his household's sins. The words move through the court like stones being stacked, one by one, careful and heavy. You cannot catch every syllable from where you stand, but the effect reaches you anyway. No one here gets to pretend anymore. That may be the most uncomfortable part. Not the blood. You expected blood. It's the honesty. On this day, the whole system runs on the stubborn refusal to act like sin is a cute little misunderstanding. No, it stains. It accumulates. It fouls up the place where God dwells with people. And now it has to be dealt with, publicly, expensively, and with an amount of livestock that would make a shepherd faint. The bull is killed. There is always a moment. However many sacrifices you've seen, there is always a moment. The sound, the movement, the sudden slackness when an enormous living thing becomes a body. Warm blood steams in the cool air as priests catch it in a basin. The metallic smell spreads immediately, bright and thick. A child somewhere behind you makes a tiny choking noise. His mother covers his mouth with her hand. Efficiently. The basin is carried carefully. Very carefully. Nobody wants to be the man who slips on holy pavement while transporting atonement. That would become your entire personality by lunchtime. The blood is taken for what comes next, and all around you the machinery of the day keeps turning. Then incense is prepared. Not the pleasant little whiff you get from someone trying to make a room feel thoughtful. This is serious incense. Hands full of sweet spice beaten fine, coals taken from the altar, heat glowing red, smoke waiting to happen. Even from a distance, you can smell the sharp resinous bite of it, thick and medicinal and holy in the way hospitals are holy when someone is trying to keep you alive. The high priest takes it in, toward the most holy place. And the whole courtyard tightens. Nobody follows him. Nobody chatters while he disappears from view. There is no casual temple banter while one man enters the place where heaven and earth feel dangerously close. This is the center of the center, the room beyond the room, the place behind the veil. The kind of place you do not visit on a whim because you were in the area. Your mouth has gone dry again. The silence is so complete that every small sound turns loud. Sandals scraping stone, a sheep coughing, fire snapping in the altar, someone clearing his throat and then instantly regretting being audible. You wait with everybody else, staring toward the sanctuary as incense smoke rises and drifts. You know why the incense goes in first. It is not just for fragrance, though that is nice considering current conditions. It creates a cloud over the mercy seat, a cover in the presence of overwhelming holiness. Even from out here, the idea of it makes your skin prickle, smoke shielding a man from glory. A human being trying to do his job in a room where too much nearness to God is not comforting in the modern coffee mug sense. It is dangerous. This is not spiritual but cozy. This is one wrong move and your relatives have to explain things. He goes in with the blood of the bull after that, and the waiting gets worse. You do not know how long it takes, because time behaves strangely when everyone is hungry and terrified. A minute feels like 10. 10 feel like a season. The sun inches higher. Sweat forms under wool and linen. Flies arrive, because naturally they do. Flies are one of the great constants of religious history. Human beings build altars, slaughter animals, and immediately the insect kingdom sends inspectors. One lands on your cheek. You slap it away with quiet fury. When the high priest emerges, there is a tiny release in the crowd. Not joy. More like the collective exhale of people who did not realize they'd been holding their lungs hostage. He is alive. The service continues. Israel has not just watched its spiritual representative vanish into the inner chamber never to return. Low bar, but important. But the morning isn't over yet. Your stomach growls, loudly enough that the old man beside you flicks his eyes over in annoyance, as though your digestive system has chosen a deeply inappropriate moment for commentary. He is not wrong. You look away with what dignity remains. Now the attention shifts again to the animals waiting nearby. The bull has been dealt with. The smoke still hangs in the air. Blood has gone where blood needed to go. But the whole court still feels suspended, as if everyone knows the day is moving towards something stranger. You can sense it in the way people keep glancing at the goats. They are still there, still goats. Dusty, bearded, weirdly rectangular in the eyes, giving off that powerful scent of lanolin, musk, and barn floor ambition. One scratches at the ground. The other gives a short little sneeze and shakes its head, ears flicking. Their complete lack of spiritual awareness is almost offensive. You, meanwhile, are trying not to think too far ahead. Because this morning is not like Passover. Passover is memory and meal and roasted lamb and family chaos. This day is affliction, humbling, empty stomachs, no perfume on the whole event, no festive release. Every motion in the sanctuary seems to say the same thing. Something has gone wrong between a holy God and a deeply stubborn people. And now the entire nation has shown up to watch the damage control. Priests continue moving around the altar with bowls, knives, basins, ashes, and that terrifying competence only possible in men who have done this before. You hear the wet splash of blood against the sides of a vessel, the scrape of metal, the mutter of coordinated instruction. Animal cries break out and stop. Fat crackles in the fire. Smoke rolls upward in greasy waves. It is organized. It is sacred. It is, inescapably, a butcher shop. A butcher shop with theological consequences. You catch sight of the white garments again, and they flash in your mind against what the high priest usually wears. On other days, he looks almost too grand to touch, all gemstones and gold threads and embroidered glory. Today, he is stripped down to basics, and that matters. No ornamental distance, no royal shimmer. Just a man in clean linen doing dangerous work on behalf of dirty people, including you. That lands unpleasantly. It is easier to stand in a crowd and think about national guilt in general terms. Broad strokes, community failures, collective rebellion, nice, blurry language. It is much less pleasant when your own memory starts producing specifics uninvited. Sharp words, petty grudges, secret envy, broken promises. That thing you said and instantly wished you could stuff back into your mouth. This day has a way of making private rot feel suddenly less private. Nobody around you needs to know your list. You know it anyway. And maybe that is why the tension feels so thick. Everyone here brought themselves. Not an ideal offering, frankly, but unavoidable. Behind every face in this packed court is a life that has needed cleaning. Every family has old wrongs, fresh wrongs, stupid wrongs, wrongs done on purpose, wrongs done because people are tired and selfish and made of dust. Now all of that is pressing toward one terrifying center. The sanctuary has become the place where the nation drags its moral garbage to the curb. Only the curb is holy, and the garbage is you. A breeze moves through the court at last, carrying cooler air from the open country beyond. For a moment, it cuts the smoke and the blood smell. You catch the dry scent of rock and scrubland again, thin and empty and sharp. The wilderness. Even from here, it feels separate. Outside the city, outside the camp, outside the ordered world of walls and washing and regular sacrifices. A place where things go when they cannot stay among people. Your skin tightens at the thought. You are not the only one looking that direction. A younger man near the edge of the crowd keeps glancing toward the eastern horizon, as though trying to see through stone, distance, and theology. An older woman beside him has her hands clenched in the folds of her robe. No one says the name again just now. They do not need to. It is already here in the waiting. More blood is applied where it must go. More cleansing, more deliberate motions. The sanctuary itself requires purging, because Israel's uncleanness has a way of sticking to everything. That thought sits badly in your stomach. Sin is not treated like a private feeling tucked inside a person. It leaks. It contaminates. It settles into the shared life of the people like grease in fabric. You can wash around it all you like. It is still there. So the holy place must be cleansed. The altar must be cleansed. The priest must be cleansed. The people must be cleansed. Everything this morning feels one step away from contamination panic, except done with divine instruction and very little room for improvisation. You think of modern cleaning, products for one delirious second, lavender spray, citrus disinfectant, wipes promising kills 99% of germs. Ancient Israel has no lemon fresh options. Ancient Israel has blood, water, smoke, confession, and a deeply troubling goat plan. This is what passes for sanitation. The hours crawl, hunger sharpens, sunlight turns from grey to gold to the harder white of full day. Shadows shorten. The stone under your feet warms. Priests keep moving with relentless precision, and the crowd keeps watching with the fixed intensity of people whose well-being depends on rituals they cannot perform themselves. That may be the strangest feeling of all. You are here, but you cannot go in there. You need this day, but you cannot carry it out. The whole nation is dependent on one man doing exactly what is required, in the required order, in the required garments, with the required blood, before the required God. It is dependence made visible. Everybody in the court can feel it. And still the goats wait. That is what keeps tugging at your attention. Not because the sacrifices before this are minor. They are not. Not because the sanctuary work is unimportant. It is life and death important. But those two animals stand there like an unanswered question with hooves. Everyone knows the morning is moving toward them, toward a choice, toward a dividing line, toward one creature taken for sacrifice and another sent where no one wants anything sent. You find yourself staring at their backs, their ribs moving in and out. One chews, one blinks. Both smell terrible. The whole nation waits anyway. Soon the lots will come out. Soon names will be assigned. Soon that uneasy word the crowd keeps half swallowing will land on a living animal's future. But for now you stand in the tightening heat, hungry, dusty, and very aware that the holiest day in Israel is also the most unnerving. Because everybody in this courtyard knows the same thing. Forgiveness is coming, they pray. But first, something has to carry away what cannot be allowed to stay. The sun is higher now. Your back already aches. Heat presses down into the court, flattening every smell into something thicker and meaner. Blood turns sweeter in the air. Smoke clings to your hair and robe. The goats, somehow, have found a way to smell even more like goats. And now the whole court narrows down to the two goats, standing side by side while their futures get announced in public. They are brought forward properly now, not just lurking at the edge like unpleasant background decorations. Close enough to study. Close enough to realize that goats are not elegant creatures. They are compact, suspicious, vaguely offended animals with twitching ears, dusty coats, narrow jaws, and those unnerving rectangular pupils that make them look as though they can see your sins in landscape mode. One of them gives a low, throaty bleat. The other answers by trying to nibble the rope. That is the level of solemnity they are bringing to this national spiritual emergency. You lean a little to see better between shoulders and head coverings. Other people do the same. All around you, necks crane, sandals scrape. Somebody mutters for a child to stop squirming. The whole court narrows its attention to these two animals as if they are about to deliver a legal verdict, when in fact they are mostly concerned with dust, flies, and whether anything nearby can be chewed. They have been chosen carefully. That much is obvious even from where you stand. They match well enough to make the point sting. Same species, same general size, same rough age, same dusty little beards, same smell of warm hide, trampled straw, and barnyard ambition. Set them in a field together on any ordinary morning, and nobody would stop to say, "Ah, yes, there go destiny and catastrophe." Today, the difference between them is still invisible. For a few more moments, they are just goats. A priest steadies one by the horn. Another keeps hold of the second. The animals shift their weight with that peculiar goat. Restlessness, all jerking knees and side-eye. One stamps, one sneezes. Flies gather near their eyes and get flicked away by irritated ears. Their coats are coarse with dust, and you can see little ridges where the hair lies wrong from transport or handling. They are not majestic. They are not glowing. They look like they were interrupted on the way to doing something stupid on a hillside. And yet, all of Israel is staring. The high priest stands before them in white linen, grave and spare and focused, while the court goes still again around him. Not perfectly still. It is never perfectly still with this many human beings and this much livestock. Somewhere behind you, a baby protests life in general. A man coughs into his sleeve. One of the goats makes a wet, snorting sound that is so rude it briefly undercuts the mood. Then even that fades, because now the lots are brought out. They are small enough to miss from a distance at first. That almost makes it stranger. So much dread gathering around objects that could fit in a man's hand. Tiny markers, tiny tablets, tiny pieces of decision. The kind of thing that would feel almost trivial on any other day. This morning, they carry the weight of a split future. You cannot hear every footstep, but you can hear the rustle of attention. People know this moment. They have been waiting for it all morning, maybe all year, maybe much longer than that. Fasting, smoke, blood, linen, fear, all of it has been tightening toward this narrow point where two ordinary animals stand and one name goes one way while the other goes another. The goats do not care. One is chewing again. You almost admire the commitment. The high priest reaches toward the container holding the lots. Every movement is deliberate, nothing flashy, no dramatic pauses meant to impress the crowd. That would be unbearable. This is not theatre, it is procedure, and somehow that makes it weirder. The matter-of-factness of it all. The absolute confidence that yes, of course, on the most sacred day of the year, we are going to stand up two goats and publicly assign one to the Lord and the other to Azazel, as if this is not the sort of thing that should require several follow-up questions. Nobody asks them, or if they do, not out loud. You can feel the tension beside you. The old man from earlier has stopped rubbing his beard. His hand just hangs there now. A woman a few paces ahead stares without blinking. A boy near the front has gone so still, his mother does not need to shush him. Everybody is waiting for a word to fall. The lots are drawn. For one breathless heartbeat, the goats are still equal. Then they are not. One lot for the Lord, one lot for Azazel. There it is. The word lands in the air with a weight that does not sound large but feels it. Azazel, dry as a stone, strange in the mouth, not shouted, not elaborated on, just assigned, as though everybody standing there can simply absorb this and continue with their day. Which, to be fair, they do. Ancient people could accept some very unsettling things if the ritual was clear enough. You, on the other hand, have the natural human reaction of wanting to stare harder. Which one? Your eyes snap to the animals, searching for some visible sign, some cosmic difference, some aura, some indication that one goat has just drawn the theological short straw. There is none. They look exactly as goat-like as before. One blinks at the crowd, the other jerks its head and nearly tangles itself in the lead rope. This is the moment that gets you. Not the grandeur, not the fear, their awkwardness. Two near-identical animals, side by side in the sanctuary court, while one is publicly designated for the Lord and the other for Azazel. And both of them are standing there with the same expression goats always have, which is somewhere between mild confusion and personal insult. Same morning, same sun, same dust in the nostrils, wildly different assignments. A priest marks them accordingly. The one for the Lord is set apart for sacrifice. The other remains alive. That distinction matters immediately, but not visually. They are still breathing the same hot air. Their flanks rise and fall. Their hooves scrape the same stone. Their smell reaches you in the same unmistakable wave of musk, dung, and dirty wool. One will die at the sanctuary. One will be sent away into the wilderness. You have to stand there and let that settle. The crowd does too. There is no gasp rolling through the court, no dramatic outbreak, just that heavy communal awareness passing across faces. This is happening now. The thing everybody knew was coming has arrived, and it is somehow both more ordinary and more unsettling than expected. Priests do not recoil from the name. They do not perform shock for the audience. They move with professional calm, because this is the day, and these are the steps, and everyone here came knowing a goat was going to end up attached to the wilderness in a way nobody entirely enjoys explaining. Part of you wants someone to stop the ritual and answer several deeply reasonable questions. the ancient part of everybody around you just watches. The goat for the Lord is brought nearer for what waits ahead. It tugs once at the rope, then settles. You can see the pulse moving in its throat. Its eyes catch the light, pale and horizontal, as weirdly serene as a creature can be, while standing in a courtyard that smells like sacrificial anxiety. It has no idea it has been designated for slaughter in the service of national cleansing. It would probably still be trying to chew things, if given half a chance. The goat for Azazel stands close by, alive, waiting. That somehow feels stranger than immediate death. Death at the altar, for all its horror, belongs to this place. Blood has already filled the morning, fire already crackles, knives are already part of the atmosphere. But the living goat remains there as an unresolved problem with horns. Marked, but not yet gone. Chosen, but still among the people. The entire court now knows that this animal is headed toward the place beyond order, beyond walls, beyond the neat boundaries of camp and sanctuary. And it is currently sniffing the ground. You cannot stop looking at its feet. Hard little hooves, dust worked into the cracks, fetlocks dirty, a smear of something on one leg that you hope is mud and know better than to trust. It shifts uneasily, feeling the pull of the rope, flicking its ears at flies. Nothing in its body language suggests it understands it has become the nation's most unsettling package delivery. A group of priests confers in low voices nearby. Short phrases, practical movements, hands touching rope, horn, shoulder. Everything around the goats feels brisk and practiced, almost domestic in its efficiency. That is part of what makes the scene so unnerving. Nobody behaves as though they are improvising in the face of weirdness. They behave as though this weirdness has a schedule. Of course it does. This whole day runs on sacred logistics. Blood here, coals there, linen only, wash again, carry that, burn this, do not touch that. And now, naturally, assign one goat to the Lord and one to Azazel. Very normal, very organized, like the world's holiest administrative nightmare. The crowd shifts as the animals are arranged for the next steps. You catch more details now. The roughness around a horn where it might have scraped wood or stone. A crust of dried foam at the corner of a mouth. The wiry beard under one chin yellowed a little from feed and age. The smell rising off them in little waves every time the breeze drops. They smell like every stable floor ever neglected. Sour hay, animal heat, and the blunt announcement that creatures have been relieving themselves wherever they please. Holiness today is not delicate. A child whispers, too loudly, asking which goat is which. His father answers without taking his eyes off the front. One for the Lord, one for Azazel. The child goes quiet again. You cannot see his face, but you can imagine it. Trying to fit those categories into a mind that knows goats as things that butt fences and eat leaves, not as living symbols standing in for cosmic disposal problems. Honestly, fair. The goat for the Lord waits with the heavy stillness of an animal held firmly by stronger hands. It does not become noble because of its assignment. That would be easier somehow. It remains exactly what it is, a goat with dusty eyelashes and a smell issue. But the designation changes how every eye in the court sees it. This one belongs to the sacrificial work. This one will meet knife and blood and altar. This one becomes part of the cleansing inside the holy space. The goat for Azazel keeps breathing. Its rope handler adjusts his grip. The animal sidesteps and bumps lightly against the other goat. For one absurd instant, They touch shoulder to shoulder like stable mates waiting for feed. Twins in inconvenience. Then the men pull them apart again, and the whole terrible fork in the road returns. One toward blood, one toward banishment. You find yourself thinking how insultingly random it looks from the outside. Not random in the sense of careless. The lot is the point. But random in the way two lives can stand beside each other, close enough to share dust, and then be divided by something neither one chose. Ancient Israel did not smooth that rough edge away. They let you feel it. They let you stand in the court and stare at two nearly identical animals carrying completely different futures, because that discomfort belongs to the ritual. The goats certainly do not soften it for you. The one for Azazel gives a sudden sharp bleat and jerks back hard enough to make its handler brace. Its eyes flash pale. Its tail twitches. For a moment, it looks less like a vessel for communal removal and more like exactly what it is. A panicky herd animal that does not appreciate crowds, cords, incense, heat, or men touching it with purpose. You understand the feeling. Sweat runs down your ribs under your robe. Dust sticks to your ankles. Hunger sits in your gut like a stone wrapped in anger. You are tired, thirsty, a little dizzy from smoke, and emotionally trapped in the most unsettling livestock ceremony of your life. The goat and you are having different days, but neither of you is thriving. Still, the service moves forward. That is what strikes you next. No one lingers over the weirdness because there is too much to do. The ritual does not stop and explain itself. It simply continues, as though everybody present knows that sin has to be dealt with in ways both bloody and bizarre. One goat will cleanse by dying. One goat will cleanse by carrying away. The categories stand there, in fur and bone. The whole court feels divided now. A priest places the lot decisively, and from that point on, there is no blurring them again. They are not merely two goats now. They are offices, roles, destinations wearing hair. The one for the Lord is held for sacrifice. The one for Azazel is kept alive for what comes later, and everybody in the court knows later is the part that crawls under the skin. Not yet. For now, the living goat stays in view, marked by future use. That waiting gives the whole court an itch under the surface. You can see people glance back at it even when priests turn their attention elsewhere. It has become impossible to ignore. A living reminder that forgiveness on this day is not only about blood brought near, but about guilt sent far. The goat uses this sacred pause to urinate, right there, a thin stream onto the holy area stone while all Israel contemplates atonement. You close your eyes for one brief second. Of course it does. A nearby priest does not even flinch. That may be the most impressive thing you have seen all morning. The man has achieved a level of professional composure modern surgeons would envy. Live animal, public ritual, national sin, goat pee. He continues as though none of this is worth a raised eyebrow. That calm spreads outward. The crowd does not laugh. Nobody recoils dramatically. A few faces tighten. Life with animals has cured these people of romanticism. If a goat is involved, indignity is involved. That is just policy. And still the significance does not lessen. It may even sharpen. The whole rite refuses to happen in a polished world. It happens here, in heat and smell and mess, among people who know what sweat feels like and what guilt feels like, and what animal waste looks like on stone. One goat for the Lord, one goat for Azazel. No attempt to make either assignment pretty. You watch the living one toss its head again, rope taut against its neck. Soon enough, it will be more than marked. Soon hands will press onto it. Words will be spoken over it. Things people have carried quietly will be laid on a creature that cannot object except by being a goat about it. But this is the hinge before that moment, the public dividing, the instant when the whole nation sees, with its own eyes, that atonement today comes in duplicate forms. One goes upward in smoke and blood. One goes outward into the waste. The sun keeps climbing. White linen flashes. Flies return to their work as unpaid critics. Somewhere beyond the courts, beyond the city, beyond the last walls and wells and cooking fires, the wilderness waits in its bare silence. You can almost feel it pulling at the edge of the day. For now, though, both goats are still here. That is the unnerving part. They stand in the same court, breathing the same air, under the same God, before the same people. One has been named for the Lord. One has been named for Azazel. And between those names hangs all the strangeness of a world where sin must be killed, carried, cleansed, and sent away before anyone can rest. The ropes tighten. The priests move closer. And the living goat, dusty and ignorant and deeply unqualified for national symbolism, waits to have a whole people placed on its back. But the goat is still here, breathing in your face, and the worst part of its day has only just begun. A priest brings it forward again, not toward a knife this time, but toward hands. That somehow feels more intimate and more upsetting. Death is brutal, but at least it is quick in concept. This is slower, more deliberate, more personal. The animal is alive, warm, blinking, and very much interested in leaving, while the high priest steps toward it with the solemn energy of a man about to load an entire nation's emotional garbage into livestock. You edge forward with everybody else, not enough to interfere. Nobody wants that kind of attention, just enough to see over a shoulder and catch the details. The goat's ribs moving, the dust along its spine, the little jerking flick of skin along its flank as a fly lands and gets told off by pure muscle. Its rope is pulled short. Its hooves scrape stone. It gives one irritated snort that mists faintly in the dry air and smells like hay, cud, and terrible life choices. The high priest stands over it in linen white enough to make the bloodstains elsewhere seem ruder than ever. No jewels now, no glittering breastpiece, no gold catching the sun and turning him into a walking candelabra. Just white fabric, plain and severe, with all the decorative splendor stripped away. On any other day, the plainness might make him look smaller. Today, it makes him look dangerous. Because now, he is about to touch the problem directly. Both hands go onto the goat's head. Not one hand, both. You feel that before you even understand it. Two palms pressing down into coarse hair between the horns, fingers spreading for grip as the animal shifts. It is not a dainty blessing. It is weight, contact, intentional pressure. The kind of touch that says this is being placed here and not merely mentioned in the general direction of here. The goat hates it immediately. Its neck jerks. The rope tightens. A handler digs in his heels and leans back. That two animal sidesteps, then stamps once, sharp and hollow against the stone. You hear the click of hoof on pavement, the rustle of linen, the low murmur of men keeping control. For one absurd second, national atonement nearly looks like it might be derailed by a medium-sized herbivore with opinions. It does not win. The priest keeps his hands there, and then the confession begins. not vague regret, not a tasteful summary, not "we all make mistakes." No, this is the full, sickening unload. The words roll out over the animal's head and into the hot air, and the court changes with them. It was tense before. Now it feels exposed. Sins, iniquities, rebellions, failures. Not just the accidental stumbles, but the crookedness, the defiance, the things done on purpose, the things hidden, the things excused, the things carried for a year because there was nowhere else to put them. You hear guilt spoken aloud in public heat. That lands differently. Everybody standing there knows the broad categories well enough. You do not need a detailed list to feel your stomach tighten. The language is heavy and comprehensive. It scoops wide. The kind of prayer that leaves no little loophole where your favorite offense can crouch and pretend it was a misunderstanding. If something was twisted, it comes under this. If something was filthy, it comes under this. If something was proud, cruel, false, greedy, hard-hearted, faithless, violent, petty, secretive, or plain stupid, it comes under this too. And all of it is being said over a goat that keeps trying to move left. You can hear the animal breathing under the voice, fast little bursts from flared nostrils, hooves shifting, rope creaking, a rough swallow. The priest's hands press more firmly as the confession continues, and the whole thing becomes almost unbearable in its physicality. Words are not floating around nicely above the scene. They seem to weigh something down. You watch a living neck bend slightly under two human hands and realize everybody around you is being invited to imagine that shame can be transferred like a burden shifted from one back to another. Portable guilt, absolutely cursed idea. And yet, there it is. A woman near you lowers her head. An old man beside the wall closes his eyes and keeps them closed. A child tries to look up at his mother and gets gently turned back toward the front. Nobody is casual now. The bleating, the twitching, the general goat absurdity have not vanished, but they have been swallowed by the voice speaking over the animal. This part reaches under the ribs, because you know what communal guilt feels like, even if your own offense has a private flavor. Everyone does. A village remembers, a family remembers, a nation remembers. Lies leave residue, violence leaves residue, neglect leaves residue. Broken vows, cheated scales, grudges fed too long, justice twisted for convenience, prayers mouthed without heart, bodies used, poor people ignored, neighbors envied, strangers shoved aside, sacred things treated like furniture. It all builds. It all sticks. And now the words keep coming, as if somebody has finally opened the storeroom where the smell was trapped. The goat tosses its head again. You see the priest's sleeves move with the effort of keeping contact. This is not symbolic in the floaty, elegant sense. This is hand pressure on bone, hair under palms, animal heat under skin. The transfer is enacted with the same stubborn materiality as everything else today. Blood is real, smoke is real, hunger is real. And now guilt is being handled as though it too has heft and cling and can be put somewhere else if God says so. That thought crawls over your arms. Because what would it mean for wrongdoing to become load-bearing? To stop being a foggy bad feeling and become, in the imagination of everybody present, something that can be placed on a scapula, on a spine, on 4 shaky legs. You are standing there watching a nation attempt the oldest deep clean in the world, except the mop has horns. The confession widens again. Not just little failures, rebellions. That word hits hard in the court. Rebellion is not a clumsy accident. Rebellion has posture. It has a jaw set the wrong way. It knows better and does it anyway. You can feel the shift as that category enters the air. This is not merely about people being frail and tired and occasionally dumb, though there has been plenty of that. This is also about people being stubborn on purpose, choosing the crooked road, walking into rot with both sandals. The goat flicks one ear, as if to say this seems unfairly personal. Honestly, yes. Its eyes show white for a moment as it jerks against the rope. A handler murmurs under his breath. Another steadies a shoulder. The priest does not remove his hands. The confession continues over movement, over smell, over flies crawling stupidly toward moisture at the corners of the animal's eyes. Sacred ritual in this place is never sterilized. Nothing is polished enough for that. Holiness keeps happening right in the middle of sweat, dung, hair, muscle, and the general inconvenience of embodied life. And maybe that is why this part works on you so strongly. Because nobody is pretending guilt lives only in abstract ideas. It gets into bodies, into habits, into kitchens and beds and marketplaces and city gates. It stains memory, it ruins sleep, it sours families, it bends public life out of shape. Of course, the answer to that would look bodily too. Of course, somebody would have to stand there and put both hands on a living creature while naming the mess out loud. A breeze stirs through the court and does absolutely nothing useful. It lifts the edge of a robe. It moves smoke from one place to another. It pushes the goat smell directly across your face so that atonement now carries notes of musk, dust, and barn floor baked in the sun. You try not to react. Everyone else is also trying not to react. National seriousness is hard enough without gagging, because the bearer of collective iniquity smells like it recently slept in a hay pile and then argued with a fence. Still the voice goes on. You do not catch every phrase from where you stand, but the effect is unmistakable. Everything foul gets gathered. Everything bent gets named under one great covering confession. The sound of it is not frantic. It is measured, heavy, formal in the way legal judgment is formal, no melodrama. That makes it worse. A shouted confession could be written off as emotion. This is steadier than that. It sounds like debt being entered into an account, except the account has fur. The goat lowers its head, then jerks it up again, trying to slip the pressure. For a moment, you can see exactly where the priest's fingers pressed into the coat. The hair parts slightly. Dust lifts. The skin beneath twitches. It is such a small thing, and it makes the whole scene feel almost unbearable. Tiny details become enormous on a day like this. A hand on hair, a hoof scraping stone, a voice saying what people would rather hide. The sensation that something invisible is being treated as stubbornly real. You realize no one around you is looking away. That says everything. Some faces are grim. Some are wet with tears that do not make a show of themselves. Some are simply fixed, the way faces get when a truth is too large to dodge. You can feel the crowd receiving this confession not as entertainment, not as performance, but as necessary pain, like a wound being cleaned with something that stings so badly you consider fighting the healer and then remember the infection. The goat sneezes. A violent, wet, thoroughly unspiritual sneeze. Its whole head jolts. The handler blinks. A fine mist catches sunlight for one humiliating instant. Somewhere in another universe, this would ruin the mood. Here, unbelievably, it almost sharpens it. because no matter how enormous the meaning becomes, the carrier is still a goat, a snorting, twitching, deeply unmajestic creature chosen to bear what the people cannot keep. Ancient worship has very little interest in protecting your dignity. The confession reaches its end slowly, like a load finally secured. You can feel the court leaning into the final phrases. The accumulated wrongs of a people are being spoken onto one designated life. Not forgiven in the sense of ignored. Not erased by pretending they never happened. Moved, assigned, carried away from the center where they have been poisoning everything. That is the mercy in this strange act. Somebody does not have to hold it forever. The priest's hands remain in place for a beat longer. Nobody moves. The goat stands there panting, sides fluttering, as if even it knows something has changed without knowing what. It is still the same animal, same horns, same rough hide, same smell that could strip paint. But you cannot look at it the same way now. A moment ago, it was the goat for Azazel. Now it feels loaded, burdened, full of spoken things. Watching that happen is deeply eerie. You have seen sacks filled with grain, wineskins swollen with new wine, donkeys piled with firewood until their backs dipped under the weight. This looks nothing like those things, and yet your mind reaches for them anyway. Because the ritual has made moral filth feel almost tangible. The people have not watched sin vanish into pleasant metaphor. They have watched it become transportable. A nation has packed its refuse into a heartbeat. The handlers shift their grip carefully. No one is rough in a panicked way, but everyone is alert now. The goat matters differently after the confession. Before, it was designated. Now, it is occupied, in the ritual sense. Not possessed, not enchanted, laden. What stood before you as a live animal has become a moving container for everything nobody wants left in the camp. You can almost feel the caution spread through the men touching the rope. Do not let it bolt. Do not let it wander. Do not let this thing carrying all that turn into a courtyard incident. That practical concern gives the moment an extra edge. This is not merely spiritual in the airy sense. It has logistics. Of course it does. Once guilt is treated as transferable, the obvious next concern is where the loaded goat is standing and who has hold of it, and whether it is about to kick somebody in the thigh. One hoof stamps again. The sound cracks through the hush. You flinch a little. So do others. The animal yanks against the line and gives a low, rusty bleat that sounds offended, confused, and mildly demonic only in the sense that all goats can sound a bit haunted when they choose. Men tighten their grip. Linen rustles. Dust jumps from the stone around those sharp little feet. The burdened creature is not serene. Why would it be? Nothing in this rite turns it into a holy mascot. It remains muscular and inconvenient, alive in the most ordinary animal way while carrying an extraordinary assignment. That contrast is half the power. Israel's failures are not loaded onto a mythical beast glowing at the edges. They are loaded onto one real goat with dirty knees and a distressing smell. That means everybody can watch it go. And now the atmosphere in the court changes again. The confession has done its work. The hidden has been brought out. The burden has been laid on. You can feel a subtle loosening among the people. Not joy exactly, not yet, but the first shift after pressure starts moving off the chest. Like the moment after a doctor says, yes, we found the poison, and yes, there is a way to get it out. Nobody smiles. This is still far too grim for that. but faces alter. Shoulders lower by fractions. Breath leaves bodies more fully. You realize that hearing sin named was awful, but hearing it assigned somewhere else is awful in a way that opens space. The same words that exposed the wound also began closing it. The goat chews once. You stare at it. There is nothing to chew. It works its jaw anyway, because goats are committed to making every sacred moment just a little bit ridiculous. A living landfill for the nation's moral corrosion, and it still finds time for that blank side-to-side chewing motion as though pondering a weed it once enjoyed. You would laugh if the scene were not so unnerving. The high priest finally lifts his hands. Dust clings faintly to his skin. The goat's hair springs back in crooked ridges where the pressure had flattened it. Such a tiny visible trace for such an enormous invisible act. Yet everybody sees it. The hands withdraw. The confession is done. The transfer has been enacted. The animal remains standing, breathing hard, carrying the weight of words no human being could physically hold. The handlers waste no time. They angle the goat aside, not away yet, but toward what comes next. It resists immediately, because of course it does. It plants itself with that maddening goat stubbornness, all four legs suddenly transformed into principles. One man pulls, another nudges from behind. The animal leans in the opposite direction with the full conviction of a creature that has never once cared about liturgical timing. This, too, is somehow fitting. A people's sins do not slide away gracefully. Even removal has to be dragged. The court watches the burdened goat regain motion in jerks and starts. Hoof, pull, bleat, hoof again. Dust rising around its legs, its beard trembling, its rectangular pupils catching the light with that same alien calm they have had all morning, as though it can see some bleak horizon nobody else wants to visit. The rope stretches taut. The men guide it. The space in front of them begins to open. And now everybody knows the thing has become directional. Before, it was among them. Marked, yes, but still waiting in the center. Now it has a vector, out. That thought passes through the crowd almost physically. You can feel people tracking it, not just with their eyes, but with their whole bodies. The sins, the rebellions, the failures just named over all Israel are no longer staying put. They are headed somewhere that is not here. Somewhere outside walls, outside ordered worship, outside ordinary human dwelling. The burden is becoming distance. The sun glares off stone hard enough to hurt. Sweat creeps down your neck. Your empty stomach twists once and settles again. Around you, the court remains packed, smelling of smoke, hide, stale breath, dust, old blood, and that special sharp edge fear gets when it starts turning into relief. Somewhere a dove flutters from a roofline. Somewhere a sandal squeaks embarrassingly at the worst possible moment. Nobody cares. All eyes stay on the goat. It is amazing how quickly a single animal can become the center of everybody's hope. Not because the people love goats. No one loves this goat right now. They need it. There is a difference. Need has teeth. Need watches every tug of the rope. Need cares very much that the burden leaves and does not drift back. Need stares at a dusty animal and thinks, go, take it, keep going. The priest who confessed over it stands back now, hands lowered, face set. His work in this moment is finished. The burden is on the creature. The next task belongs to the one who will lead it. But that comes after this hanging breath, This pause while the court takes in what has just happened, all the stubbornness, corruption, failure and shame of a people ceremonially pressed onto a living back. You stand there in the heat and feel the horror and mercy together. That is the center of this day. Not tidy innocence, not denial, not a cheerful reset button, something darker and kinder at once. Wrongdoing is treated as real enough to contaminate a whole community, and God gives a way for it to be carried off where it cannot keep sitting at the dinner table. The goat jerks forward another step. Dust puffs around its hooves. The rope tightens, and the court prepares to watch sin walk away toward the wilderness. Soon the camp is behind you. The songs are gone, and even the air feels less friendly. It happens faster than you expect. One moment there are walls, people, gates, murmured prayers, the dense human smell of 1,000 anxious bodies pressed into sacred business. The next, the noise thins. Sandals scuff over harder ground. Voices drop away behind you. What remains is the rope in a man's hand, the steady drag of a reluctant goat, and that strange sensation that you have stepped out of the place where ordinary rules are enforced and into the place where things are simply allowed to be bad. The designated man does not look glamorous. Of course he doesn't. Nobody makes songs about the guy whose job is take our national moral compost heap into the wasteland and come back later. He is practical, focused, probably already regretting several life choices. His grip stays firm on the rope, while the goat tries every ancient, sacred, deeply annoying trick in the species handbook, sidestepping, planting all four hooves, jerking its head sideways, and briefly pretending it has become a statue. It has not become a statue. It has become a logistical problem with horns. You follow as far as people are allowed, along with others who cannot quite bear to stop watching. Nobody wants this burdened animal wandering out of sight too early. You need to see direction. You need to see distance begin. The whole crowd has spent the day hearing blood hit basins and prayers scrape the sky. Now all that pressure funnels into this one departure, this one moving blot of dust and coarse hair heading toward the blank places outside habitation. The road out is no grand processional, no flower petals, no polished paving stones, no inspirational music swelling in the background. Just dirt, loose rock, thorny scrub, and the kind of light that makes your eyes water and your patience evaporate. The ground is littered with broken stones, sharp enough to punish weak sandals, and the goat dances over them with the irritating precision of a creature born knowing exactly where to place each hoof while you are still negotiating every step like a sleep-deprived tourist on a hiking trail you deeply resent. The smell changes too. Inside the camp, it was smoke, blood, dung, sweat, hot stone, and old wool. Out here, the air gets drier, cleaner in one sense, and worse in another. Dust rises with every footfall and coats your tongue. Crushed sage gives off a bitter smell when stepped on. Somewhere nearby, there is the dry, sour scent of animal droppings baked for so long in the sun, they have stopped pretending to be fresh and settled into a permanent state of hostile existence. The goat keeps moving. Not willingly, never willingly. Its beard bobs as it tugs against the rope. The hair along its spine catches the light in rough little ridges. Every so often, it gives a harsh complaint that ricochets off the stones and sounds absurdly loud now that the crowd is fading behind you. That bleat has lost all comic innocence. In the camp, it sounded like a barnyard nuisance. Out here, it sounds like something objecting to being taken where things are not meant to return from. And now you feel the landscape widening around you. That is the first unnerving thing. Not a monster leaping from a rock, not spooky music, just space. Too much of it. The houses are thinning behind you, the cultivated edges falling away, and the open ground ahead seems to stretch with a kind of impolite confidence. No walls, no ovens, no women grinding grain, no children darting underfoot, no old men arguing at a gate. Human life stops leaving fingerprints on the land, and the land immediately starts acting like it never needed you. That gets under the skin. Because the camp, for all its stink and noise and crowding, is organized existence. There are boundaries there. Fires are where fires belong. Food is where food belongs. Unclean things go out. Sacred things come in. People know their places even when they dislike them. Out here, that neat arrangement frays almost at once. Thorn bushes grow where they please. Lizards vanish under rocks like tiny judgmental ghosts. Wind skates across the ground and erases tracks as if the earth itself is not interested in preserving your afternoon. You look ahead and see heat beginning to shimmer. The stones farther out seem to wiggle in the light. Hills blur at the edges. The horizon has the strange, watery look of something seen through tears, though there is no water here worth speaking of. Your mouth is dry. Your stomach, empty from the fast, folds in on itself and sends up a bitter little protest. This is not a place that welcomes weakness. It notices weakness the way a crow notices something shiny. The designated man keeps going. He knows the route, or enough of one. There is always some path by which people move out to the harsh places, though path is generous. It is more a repeated agreement between human feet and difficult terrain. A narrow memory in the land. Stones have been scuffed here before. Scrub is bent back where bodies brushed past. Somewhere in that trail is the habit of many years, many day of atonements, many burdened goats escorted out of ordered life and into a geography that feels like a bad idea. And over that bad idea hangs a name, Azazel. Even hearing it in your mind feels different out here. Inside the sanctuary courts, it was a ritual term, solemn and alarming, but still framed by walls and priests and procedures. Out here, the name starts to gather weather around it. Azazel sounds less like a line in a ceremony, and more like something that belongs to cliffs, ruined places, and the sort of silence that makes people talk too loudly just to prove they are still present. Whether anyone around you imagines a demon, a desolation, a jagged wilderness, or some dreadful overlap of all three, the effect is the same. This is the direction of removal. This is where what does not belong among people gets sent. The wilderness was never nothing. That is a modern fantasy, the idea that empty land is merely empty land. Out here, emptiness has personality. It presses on the ears. It swallows small noises and magnifies others. A pebble kicked loose sounds important. The buzz of an insect near your face becomes intolerably intimate. Wind threading through dry thorns can sound like whispering if your nerves are already doing unpaid overtime. The place feels inhabited, not by neighbors with casseroles, but by absence itself, by hunger, by exposure, by all the things waiting just beyond the edge of settled order. You understand why people attach names to such places, because a stretch of uncultivated terrain with difficult access does not quite capture the feeling of standing where wells are scarce. Shade is a rumor, and every shadow under a boulder looks like it might have opinions. People need words stronger than geography. They need a name that can carry unease. Azazel does that. It clings to the mind like burrs in wool. The goat suddenly lunges sideways toward a patch of scrub. Apparently, even burdened with the nation's wrongdoing, it still has time to make this inconvenient. The man hauling it snaps the rope short and braces his legs. Dust kicks up around his ankles. The animal plants itself and twists, eyes bright, nostrils flaring. For one ridiculous moment, the cosmic removal of Israel's sins almost pauses because the chosen carrier has spotted a dry bush and decided this is now the hill on which it will emotionally die. The struggle is brief. The man has done this kind of work before, if not this exact job on this exact day. He leans his weight, curses under his breath in the weary tone of somebody arguing with furniture, and gets the animal moving again. You almost feel sorry for him. Almost. Then the goat yanks once more and nearly dislocates his shoulder, and sympathy returns with enthusiasm. A few more people peel away and stop. They have come far enough. That, too, matters. There is always a point where witnesses become unnecessary and even unwelcome, where the burden must go farther than ordinary eyes are comfortable following. You stand with those lingering at the edge and watch the pair continue. The man grows smaller by degrees. The goat remains visible because it moves like an insult, all jerks and pauses and stubborn little surges forward. The farther they go, the less human the world looks. Cultivated patches disappear. Paths become guesswork. The ground breaks into limestone shelves and loose gravel that slides underfoot. Thorn bushes crouch low and mean, grey-green and armed like they are expecting trouble. A dead branch lies bleached nearly white in the sun. Somewhere above, a bird circles with the kind of patience that makes you very aware of your own softness. Nothing out here is decorative. Every plant looks like it fought for moisture and won by becoming unpleasant to touch. Every slope seems designed to punish ankles. The rock itself is merciless, glaring pale where the sun hits it full, then dropping into narrow shadows black enough to feel colder than they should. You can imagine why people talk about these lands as places for wild things, lonely spirits, danger and banishment. Civilization has not been invited to settle comfortably here. It could, perhaps, with labor and walls and desperate persistence. But left to itself, the wilderness prefers sharp edges and difficult outcomes. The man and goat pass into a stretch where the heat shivers above the ground. For a moment, they look unreal. The air bends their outlines. The goat becomes a wavering shape with horns, then snaps back into focus. The man's white garment catches the light like a torn scrap against all that stone. You blink hard. Sweat runs into your lashes. The world out there is always half threatening to dissolve into glare and mirage, as though the land cannot even be bothered to hold its own shape steady for your convenience. And this is where the burden goes. Not into a tidy pit with a label on it. Not into storage. Into the place where order thins out. That is what the camp understands in its bones. Sin does not simply need forgiveness in some private inward sense. It needs removal from the shared life of the people. Out here, the removal becomes visible. You can watch wrongness sent where wrongness belongs. Beyond the boundaries of daily bread, family tents, market disputes, covenant meals, clean garments, and ordinary sleep. The desert is the anti-home. It is where a burden can be carried far enough that nobody expects it back by supper. Azazel haunts that logic. Maybe some hear the name and think of a wilderness power, a spirit attached to barren cliffs and broken places. Maybe others hear a place name, a severe destination, the very image of separation and rocky desolation. Most likely, in the imagination of ordinary people, those ideas slide together like mud and straw in a brick. The place has a presence because it is a place. The name feels like a being because the wasteland itself behaves as though it has moods. Either way, nobody hears for Azazel and pictures a picnic. Nobody pictures shade, sweet water, and a friendly welcome committee. You see it clearly. A sun-blasted slope, a goat stumbling over loose stone, wind moving through cracks in the hills with a low throat sound, dry gullies where flash floods can come like divine temper tantrums and then vanish, leaving only polished rock and broken branches. Caves dark enough to hide anything from jackals to regrets. Silence so broad, it stops feeling passive and starts feeling alert. That silence is the real shock. Cities are loud. Camps are loud. Even villages carry the constant soundtrack of human existence. Pounding grain, coughing elders, barking dogs, babies objecting to life, women calling to one another, men arguing over weights and boundaries like they invented annoyance. Out here, all that is gone. The goat's hooves click and scrape. The rope creaks. The man's breathing carries on the air. Then there are long stretches when almost nothing happens at all. The nothing has weight. You feel it in your chest. This is why lonely places unsettle people. They do not flatter your importance. In the camp, every person is somebody's son, neighbor, creditor, wife, rival, customer, priest, elder, nuisance. Out here, you are mostly meat in sandals. The desert reduces your social complexity with brutal efficiency. It has no interest in your standing. It cares whether you have water, shade, and enough sense not to break an ankle 3 miles from help. The goat, meanwhile, is having the sort of day that would justify a formal complaint. It scrambles, slips, recovers, and flings a look backward once that seems genuinely accusatory. Its coat is dustier now, collecting the chalky powder of the trail. Burrs catch in the hair around its legs. One ear flicks constantly at flies determined to remain employed. The burden on it is invisible, but the physical journey is not. You can see the effort in the rise and fall of its sides, in the way it lowers its head against the pull, in the stubborn little pauses where it seems to ask whether lying down forever might solve this. It will not be allowed to lie down forever. Not here. The designated man glances back once toward the camp. From this distance, the habitation behind him is already soft at the edges, a cluster of human insistence under the blank sky. Ahead is rough country, broken ground, ravines, places where nobody builds unless they have no better options. He turns forward again and keeps walking, because that is the assignment. Lead the burden away, keep it moving, put distance between the people and what has been laid on this animal. You watch until they are nearly silhouettes among the rocks. At a certain point, the eye starts filling in details it can no longer truly see. You know the rope is there, though it becomes hard to make out. You know the goat is still resisting in all the tedious ways goats resist, because it would be dishonest for this one to suddenly become cooperative out of respect for theology. You know the man is sweating through his clothing and probably inventing several new prayers that are mostly complaints. The landscape takes them piece by piece, First, the voices are gone, then the details of movement. Then they dip behind a rise and reappear smaller than before, and the whole thing starts to feel less like watching a procession and more like watching something be swallowed. That is the right word for it. The wilderness does not receive politely. It swallows. Paths vanish into it. People vanish into it. Scapegoats vanish into it, carrying everything a nation has confessed and cannot keep. You stand there longer than necessary. So do the others. Nobody wants to be the first to turn away, because turning away means trusting that the burden is really going. Trusting the wasteland to hold what was sent to it. Trusting that the camp, for one merciful stretch of time, will not be breathing its own accumulated corruption back in. The sightline matters. The distance matters. Watching the goat get small matters. At last, it is mostly gone. Just a pale flicker of movement between stone and scrub, then not even that. Only the desert remains. All glare and hard ridges and cruel little thorn. Bushes crouched under the sun. And standing there at the edge, you understand with your whole body why ancient people never called this place neutral. This is where things go when they are put away from human life. This is where uncleanness is banished, where rebels flee, where hungry men wander, where wild animals den in ruined places, where the edge of settlement frays into uncertainty. The camp is covenant, firelight, shared bread, argued rules, named boundaries, and the constant irritating proof that people are living together under God. The wilderness is everything outside that arrangement. Exposure, unruliness, distance, the anti-sanctuary. So of course, Azazel belongs out there. Whether Azazel is heard as demon, wasteland, lord of desolation, or simply the old terrible name for the far-off place where the burden disappears, the fit is perfect. You do not send this goat into a vineyard. You do not send it into somebody's courtyard. You send it where no one sane plans to live, where the map grows teeth, where the land itself feels like it is keeping company with dangerous powers. A gust of wind lifts dust into your face. You spit grit from your teeth and squint into the light. There is nothing to see now but the harsh folds of the hills and the washed-out sky above them. Still, your skin prickles, not because something leaps from behind a rock. That almost would be easier. No, the feeling is stranger. It is the awareness that beyond the ordered life of the camp, there are places not arranged for your safety, places where holiness is not approached with priestly linen and careful basins, but where chaos just waits around in broad daylight, sunbathing on the stones. And somewhere out there, the goat keeps going. Its hooves strike dust and rock. Its breath comes hard. The rope stays taut in the hand of the man assigned to see this through. Behind them, the camp begins to settle under the enormous relief of burden moving away. Ahead of them lies demon country, or desolation country, or whatever name people use when they mean the place beyond the last friendly sound. The wilderness takes the offering no altar could keep. And the man walks on, leading the nation's shame deeper into the blinding empty land where order runs out and only the hard old silence remains. But ancient people are just like modern people in one important way. Once a ritual is this strange, nobody can resist elaborating on it. Simply releasing the goat into the wilderness apparently stopped feeling satisfying. You can almost hear the collective discomfort. So, we just let it go? With all of that on it, all the filth, Rebellion, oath-breaking, grudges, hidden rot, public disgrace, private shame, all strapped invisibly to one hairy animal with commitment issues? And then what? It wanders around nibbling thorns until sunset? Maybe circles back. Maybe shows up behind somebody's tent next Tuesday looking smug. Nobody likes that possibility, especially not when the possibility in question is your national sins returning like a lost goat with terrible timing. So the imagination of later generations gets busy, very busy. You start hearing the wilderness described with even sharper edges, the destination feeling less like some rough area outside camp and more like a cosmic hazardous waste site. Azazel grows teeth in people's minds. Not literal teeth, though at this point you would hardly be surprised. More like personality, presence, a name that no longer sits politely in a ritual sentence, but stalks around the cliffs like it owns the place. And once that happens, the goat's trip gets upgraded, not simplified, never simplified, upgraded into a whole grim little system. You picture the road again, but now it is more organized than before. Not because the wilderness has become friendly. Absolutely not. The wilderness is still out there being sunburned and sinister. But the people have added stations along the route, stopping points, places prepared ahead of time. Little intervals of human control poked into a very uncontrollable landscape, like setting folding chairs along the path to a disaster. There are men posted at these stations. Of course there are. Ancient religion, like modern office life, eventually produces procedures for everything. If one goat is carrying the moral sewage of the nation into demon country, somebody is going to make a schedule. Somebody is going to assign personnel. Somebody is going to say, with a completely straight face, that there should be designated stopping places at measured distances because we are not animals. The goat, to be fair, is an animal and remains unimpressed by administration. You see the procession moving from station to station. The man leading the goat is offered food and drink, though on that day he may not take it. Others accompany him part of the way. Then they stop. Another group sees him farther on. Nobody wants the mission abandoned halfway because the escort twisted an ankle or had a heat stroke episode beside a ravine, while the goat wandered off chewing scrub with the sins of Israel dangling from its invisible luggage rack. So the road gets watched, measured, managed. That says something about people, doesn't it? You load your guilt onto a goat and still feel the need to install checkpoints. At one of these stations, you stand in the shade of a rough shelter, if shade is even the word for crouching behind stones while the sun tries to cook your skull. Dust has settled in the creases of everyone's garments. Lips are dry. Eyes sting. Somebody wipes sweat with the back of a hand and leaves a streak of pale grit on the forehead. In the distance, the goat comes on, jerking at the rope with all the spiritual sensitivity of a badly parked cart. It arrives snorting. Its sides heave. Foam gathers around the bit of its mouth where the rope rubs. The smell hits before the animal does. Hot hair, dust, old lanolin, and that sharp barnyard stink goats produce as if offensiveness were a sacred calling. Burrs cling to its legs. One horn has picked up a smear of dirt. This creature is carrying everyone's sins and still somehow looks like the least trustworthy employee on the farm. The man leading it looks worse. He has the baked expression of someone who has spent too long outside with a difficult package and no refund policy. Sandals powdered white, calves trembling, shoulders stiff. He takes the offered courtesy, maybe not the offered food, and then keeps going because this is not the sort of assignment where close enough inspires confidence. The unease grows in the retelling. That is what happens. You do not watch year after year of burdens being sent away and remain content with vague endings. People start wanting certainty. They want the line between camp and wilderness bold enough to see from orbit. They want a finish. They want to know that what left is not browsing among thistles waiting for moonrise and a chance to come wandering home like a deeply cursed pet. So in later tellings, the destination narrows. Not just wilderness, a cliff. Of course it becomes a cliff. Because if there is one thing human beings love, it is adding a final dramatic, absolutely irreversible flourish to a ritual already operating at 9 levels of intensity. A bare release into the wasteland leaves too much room for imagination. A cliff, on the other hand, feels definitive. No one sees a goat hurled down a rocky drop and thinks, well, perhaps it will reflect for a while and return morally improved. No, that goat is not coming back. You go with the escort farther now in your mind, all the way to the edge where the land breaks open. The path is narrower. Loose stones skitter underfoot and vanish into a ravine with little ticking sounds that take too long to stop. The air feels hotter near the rock, then suddenly cooler where the cliff throws shade like a threat. You smell sun-struck limestone, the bitter resin of scrub crushed under sandals, and the rank panic of the animal as it realizes this walk has developed a personality. The goat resists. Naturally. This is not an animal embracing destiny. This is a goat. It braces all 4 legs, neck stiff, eyes rolling, making those horrible choking complaints that sound like a rusty hinge discovering religion. The man handling it has to wrestle the creature toward the edge. You see his jaw clench, forearms flex, dust sliding under his heels. The whole grand machinery of atonement, all the holiness and dread and sacred choreography has arrived at its practical conclusion. One exhausted man arguing with a goat on a cliff. There is something almost offensively human about that. Then comes the push. In some accounts, it is not graceful. Why would it be graceful? Nothing involving a panicked goat and a precipice is ever going to feel elegant. The animal goes over in a storm of scrambling hooves, falling stone, and one final protest swallowed by the ravine. It hits ledges. It tumbles. It breaks apart before ever reaching the bottom. Brutal, final, impossible to mistake. The burden is not just sent away. It is shattered out there among the rocks where nobody sane is building a summer house. You stand at the edge afterward and look down. It is a terrible view. Jagged shelves of stone, broken brush clinging to cracks, heat rising from the ravine in waves that smell like dust and old minerals. Maybe a dark smear far below, maybe scraps caught on thorn. Nothing tidy, nothing ceremonial anymore. The wilderness has taken over the process with its usual bedside manner, which is to say none whatsoever. And yet, people feel better. That is the darkly funny part. Because apparently the thing everyone needed for peace of mind was not only removal, but impact. Not just distance, splat-level certainty. Ancient hearts, much like modern ones, are oddly comforted by proof that the problem has been taken care of in a way that cannot simply stroll back before dinner. But the elaborations do not stop with the cliff. No, because ritual with this much anxiety always picks up accessories. Now you have the scarlet thread, a strip of crimson tied to the goat, or divided, So that part remains back at the sanctuary and part goes with the animal. Bright red against dusty hair, bright red against white stone, bright red in a world mostly colored beige, bone and regret. You see it fluttering in the dry wind, this little line of color attached to all that invisible contamination, like a tag on hazardous materials saying, handle with extreme reluctance. The thread matters because color matters. Scarlet looks like blood. Scarlet looks like stain. Scarlet looks like the visible version of guilt, the sort of thing you cannot pretend not to notice. In later memory, people watch that thread with the sort of desperate interest usually reserved for medical test results. Has it changed? Has the burden been dealt with? Is the sign still red, still glaring, still hanging there like a public accusation? You can feel the communal nerves crackling around that tiny strip of dyed wool. Imagine being the person assigned to monitor it. Some poor soul is squinting at fabric while a nation waits emotionally in the parking lot. If the crimson sign turns white, relief floods through everybody like cool water. If not, well, that is a long walk home with your conscience making direct eye contact. The whole thing has the air of sacred bureaucracy crossed with apocalyptic customer service. You submitted your sins. Please await visual confirmation of successful processing. And somewhere out in the wilderness, the goat remains profoundly unconsulted. You can almost laugh at the contrast. Men in linen, stations on the road, measured distances, designated escorts, coded bits of wool, solemn expectations, all built around one creature whose deepest personal ambition was probably to eat something rude and headbutt a cousin. Ancient Israel is trying to manage cosmic contamination, and the central vessel for the operation keeps stopping to be difficult in exactly the way goats have always been difficult. That difficulty may be part of why Azazel grows darker in the imagination. Because once the wilderness becomes more than scenery, once it starts feeling like an address where dangerous things belong, the name attached to it starts drawing stories around itself like burrs catching in wool. You hear about a rebel figure, Azazel, not merely a destination now, but a being associated with corruption and ruin, taught to humanity through forbidden knowledge and violence. Not a vague desert mood, a proper villain, the sort of ancient troublemaker whose resume would be too upsetting to read aloud at supper. And where is this rebel dealt with? In the desert, naturally, in the rough, broken land, bound there, covered in jagged stones, left in darkness until judgment. You can feel how neatly that fits the atmosphere already hanging around the scapegoat ritual. The wilderness was never a neutral backdrop with nice hiking opportunities. It was where disorder got dumped, where chaos was exiled, where dangerous powers belonged because no one wanted them inside the walls. So now, in these later imaginings, Azazel becomes the kind of rebel spirit who is imprisoned out there among the sharp places. The goat is not merely sent into empty country. It is sent toward the old zone of curse, ruin, and chained rebellion. That makes the whole journey even less like a stroll. You picture the ravines differently now. Those deep cuts in the land are not just erosion channels. They feel like storage, like divine quarantine. The rocks lie in heaps like collapsed teeth. Caves open black and narrow, smelling of bat droppings, dry rot, and trapped heat. Wind moans through cracks in the cliffs with the exact tone of a place minding its own sinister business. Somewhere in that harsh geography, later generations imagine a rebellious being pinned under judgment, buried in the same wilderness that swallows the goat. The place becomes crowded with meaning, not crowded with people. Heaven forbid. Still empty in the human sense. Empty of ovens, beds, fig trees, market stalls, and all the ordinary little proofs that life is under control, but crowded with dread, crowded with association, crowded with every old fear that the world beyond the camp is where filth, curse, and violence go when they need an address. That is why the road matters so much. The stations, the escorts, the handoffs, the thread, the cliff, the careful watching. All of it is people trying very hard to keep a border intact. On one side, camp, altar, tents, meals, children, elders, laws, washing, sacrifice, sleep. On the other side, ravines, thorns, desolation, wandering beasts, rebel powers, and a goat loaded down with everything everyone wants gone. You can practically smell the administrative desperation. No mistakes, please. No delays. No accidental re-entry of concentrated national guilt. At one station, a man shades his eyes and waits for the signal from farther out. Another stands by, counting time or distance under his breath. Someone back in the city glances toward the wilderness, over and over, trying not to. Somewhere near the sanctuary, a piece of scarlet wool hangs in expectation, and more than one stomach twists harder over that little thread than over the entire day's fasting. Ritual can do that. It takes enormous invisible needs and nails them onto one very visible object. Today, the visible object is goat-adjacent fabric. Magnificent. And still there is the memory of the push, the fall, the certainty. Later retellings savor that certainty because uncertainty is exhausting. If you have ever checked a door 3 times to make sure it is locked, you already understand the emotional logic. Ancient people are doing the theological version of checking the door, then installing a bolt, then asking the neighbor to confirm the bolt, then tying a red string to the handle for emotional support. Because sin wandering back is the nightmare. Not just sin in the abstract, the accumulated grime of a whole people. Betrayals, lies, petty theft, violence, secret lust, public injustice, broken vows, resentments fed like house pets. Every rancid thing confessed over that animal. You do not want that padding around outside the camp after dark. You do not want to hear a bleat beyond the tents and think, oh no, the consequences have returned. So the goat gets the full treatment, escorted, observed, marked, driven out, and, in some traditions, broken on the rocks so thoroughly that even the most anxious soul can whisper, yes, it is gone. You stand at the final station and feel the road stretching behind you all the way back to human order. It is a strange comfort. Each stop along the way is like a knot tied in a rope between camp and wasteland. Human effort, human vigilance, human insistence that the transfer be completed properly. The bureaucracy is almost touching in its nervousness. Almost. Then you remember that all of this exists because one ritual goat was not trusted to stay lost. Fair enough. A hot wind scrapes over the stones. It carries dust, dry herb, and the faint chalk smell of crushed rock. Far off, maybe you hear a raven. Maybe just the wind doing an excellent impression of one. The men begin to turn back in stages, each returning from his appointed point, re-entering the zones of habitation one by one, like swimmers climbing out of dangerous water. Their faces are tight with sun and strain, sandals scuffed, garments streaked. Nobody has the look of someone who enjoyed a scenic outing, but they are coming back. The goat is not. That is the whole comfort of the thing. Back in the city, when word travels that the mission is complete, the relief is almost physical. Shoulders unclench. People breathe deeper without noticing. The day's tension, wound tight as gut string, eases a little. The burden has gone where burdens go. Out past the stations, past the last witness, past the last decent patch of ground, into the hard places, into Azazel's territory, into ravines and broken cliffs and all the geography of removal. And in later memory, that is never left vague again. Too much was riding on it. So the stories sharpened the edges. They gave the wilderness a chained rebel. They gave the road attendants. They gave the goat a scarlet marker and a fatal ending. They built procedures around dread and turned anxiety into ritual logistics. Very human, very solemn, slightly deranged, completely understandable. Because once you have seen a nation place its shame on a living creature and send it into the waste, probably it wandered off, does not feel like enough. You want distance. You want finality. You want the desert itself to shut the door. And out there among the cliffs, under the white hammer of the sun, with stones hot enough to burn your palm and ravines deep enough to swallow, a cry. That is exactly what the wilderness seems to do. By now, you've learned the desert is never just scenery. It has a reputation. You feel that reputation before you can explain it. Step outside the settled places long enough, and the world changes personality. The ground gets stingier. The shade gets meaner. The silence stops feeling peaceful and starts feeling like something is listening from behind a rock. Inside the camp, everything has a place. Pots go here. Beds go there. Fires are built where they belong. Waste goes outside because nobody enjoys a surprise trench situation near breakfast. Children are counted. Animals are tethered. Boundaries exist, which is ancient life's version of luxury. Outside the camp, luxury ends immediately. Out there, the wind steals moisture from your mouth. Thorn bushes hook your hem like needy little criminals. Stones shift under your sandals with all the loyalty of a bad employee. You look for landmarks and get cliffs, gullies, scrub, and one lizard doing push-ups on a hot rock as if the wasteland were a fitness retreat. This is why the border matters. You can almost walk it with your eyes closed. Behind you, tents and cooking smoke and the thick human smell of thousands of people packed together. Ahead, glare, emptiness, and the strong impression that nobody would hear you scream except birds with ugly intentions. Camp is crowded, messy, loud, and occasionally smells like boiled lentils, sheep grease, and feet. It is still home. The wilderness is what home is not. And when a place is what home is not, your imagination gets busy. So you move through ruined places in your mind now, the sort of places people avoid when they can help it. Broken walls, cracked gates, roof beams collapsed in heaps of dust. Once there were ovens here, arguments here, babies crying here, somebody burning flatbread because they got distracted. Now there is only rubble, owl calls, wind sifting grit through empty doorways, and the dry pellet droppings of animals who did not ask permission. This is where people start muttering about strange inhabitants, not neighbors, worse. You picture wild creatures moving through abandoned courtyards where people used to sing during meals. Jackals nose through shattered masonry. Their paws make almost no sound. Their smell is rank and musky, wet fur mixed with carrion and old breath. Somewhere in the dark, an owl lets out one of those noises that sounds less like a bird and more like a tax audit from the underworld. Then there are the shaggy things, goatish, dancing, unsettling little beings. people whisper about in lonely places. Satyrs, goat demons, whatever name you slap on them, the effect is the same. A ruined place is not merely empty. It has gone strange. It has become the kind of address where human order got evicted and something weirder moved in wearing hair and bad intentions. Can you blame people for feeling that way? You stand in a city after judgment has blown through it, and it does not feel neutral. Walls split open like old bread. Burned beams stink of charcoal and bitter resin. Ash works into your sandals and coats your toes black. Weeds push through thresholds where respectable people once swept every morning. The whole place feels like a house after a catastrophe, except the house is a city, and the catastrophe has moved in permanently. In those places, wilderness creeps in like floodwater. First the grass comes, then thorns, then animals, then the stories. A once busy square becomes a feeding ground for desert beasts. The soundscape changes from bargaining and gossip to insects rasping, wings beating, and something unseen knocking over stones at dusk. Human voices vanish, so your mind fills the gap with other voices. Not because you are foolish, because an abandoned place feels occupied by absence, and absence is surprisingly loud. That feeling runs all through the world you are standing in. The edge of settlement is the edge of predictability. Beyond it live wild beasts, bandits, hunger, heat stroke, and every story your grandmother told in a low voice while the lamp burned down. You do not send children there. You do not graze the good animals there unless you must. You do not build your nice house there with the courtyard fig tree and pretend the neighbors are charming. That land belongs to harder things. You can see it in the prophets' ruined landscapes. Splendid cities collapse, and almost immediately the descriptions turn zoological and creepy. Ostriches show up. Jackals move in. Hyenas laugh somewhere in the dark with that deeply offensive sound they make. Desert creatures lounge where officials once strutted around in expensive sandals. It is civic decline by way of a haunted petting zoo. And then come the beings that are harder to pin down. Night creatures, desert spirits. The kind of inhabitants mentioned just clearly enough to make the hairs rise on your arms. Lonely wastes are where these names live. Dry ravines, broken towers, places where nobody lights a lamp unless something has gone very wrong. Human beings have always been extremely talented at assigning unsettling tenants to unsettling real estate. You feel the logic in your bones. A place without water already feels cursed. A place without people feels judged. A place that used to have people and does not anymore feels watched. So when the camp speaks of the wilderness as a place for the unclean, the banished, the dangerous, it is not abstract. You smell the difference. Camp smells like cooking smoke, animal pens, leather, bread, sweat, wool damp from washing, and occasionally a latrine emergency on a hot day. Wilderness smells like dust, crushed sage, sun-baked stone, and the sweet-sour stink of something dead under a bush. One of those feels survivable. The other feels hungry. That is why certain things are pushed outward. Skin disease that makes people unclean for a time. Outside. Corpses and the contamination attached to them. Dealt with carefully, because death does not get to lounge in the middle of holiness like an unwanted houseguest. Dangerous impurity, unresolved disorder, animal carcasses, ashes from certain sacrifices, all the things with spiritual and physical wrongness clinging to them like burrs in wool, they move away from the center, away from the holy place, away from blessing, away from where people sleep. This is not because the wilderness is pretty. Absolutely not. This is because the wilderness can hold what the camp cannot. Think of the camp as the world in miniature. There is a center. There are layers. There are rules. Closest to the holy place, life is arranged with stomach-knotting care. You wash. You wait. You bring what is required. Even your clothing matters. Move farther out and there are families, cooking fires, arguments over borrowed tools, babies wailing, men repairing, straps with bad tempers, women grinding grain until their shoulders burn. It is ordinary life, sticky and noisy and gloriously contained. Then beyond all that, the line. Cross it and order thins. The effect is almost physical. You leave behind the sound of many people and enter the sound of almost none. Your own footsteps get louder. A raven's croak feels personal. Wind drags grit across rock with a dry hiss, like old parchment being torn very slowly. You start scanning the ridges without meaning to. That is chaos country. Not chaos as in fireworks and party hats. Chaos as in the old fear that the world can come apart. Water fails. Crops fail. Direction fails. Human company fails. Your skin cracks. Your tongue sticks to your teeth. Your food runs out. In settled space, creation looks tamed enough to live with. In the wilderness, creation reminds you that it was never domesticated to begin with. You are one twisted ankle away from becoming a cautionary tale. No wonder the strange beings live there in people's minds. The wilderness is where scapegoats go, where rebels are imagined to be chained, where wild beasts breed in ruins, where mournful cries echo from empty structures. It is also where people wander when judged, where exiles weep, where prophets flee, where desperate men hide in caves that smell like bat droppings and damp stone and ancient disappointment. The desert is not one thing. It is every place where life gets stripped down to what remains when protection is gone. And what remains is not cozy. You can feel the contrast even stronger on feast days when the camp is at full volume. Smoke rises straight in the morning air. Priests move with practiced urgency. Families cluster by tribe and kin. Animals bleat, children fidget, old men squint, women whisper, and the whole place throbs with the effort of being a people held together. Law, worship, memory, sacrifice, food, kinship, all of it packed close. Then one gate farther out, and the world looks uncivilized again. Not evil in every rock and shrub, but untamed, unblessed in the same concentrated way, open to menace, open to exile, open to every story about what prowls when human beings are gone. A campfire in that landscape does not make it yours. It merely announces where to find you. So when people hear of creatures haunting desolations, the reaction is not scholarly curiosity. It is more like, yes, that tracks. Of course, ruined palaces belong to owls and jackals now. Of course, shaggy desert beings caper where songs have stopped. Of course, the waste beyond the city wall becomes the postal address for curse, uncleanness, and everything everyone wants at a distance. You have stood at the edge of the inhabited world. You know the mood. It gets worse at night. Daytime wilderness is brutal but visible. You can at least see what might kill you. Nighttime wilderness is another department entirely. The cold arrives fast and rude. Rocks radiate away their heat. Shadows pool in gullies until every depression looks bottomless. Small noises multiply. Something skitters. Something yips. Something flaps out of a ruin and nearly ejects your soul through your throat. You pull your cloak tighter and stare into the dark. The stars are mercilessly bright. No walls, no gate, no watchman calling the hours, no lamplight through woven tent cloth, just black ridges, thorn silhouettes, and the sense that the world outside human order does not care whether you are comfortable. This is where lonely things belong. This is where banishment lands. This is where a burdened goat disappears without leaving a forwarding address. And now the ritual makes emotional sense in a way your skin understands. You do not send the sins of the people to a pleasant meadow. You do not escort them to a nice stream with reeds and birdsong, and maybe a picnic blanket if time allows. You send them to the opposite of blessing, to the place beyond the boundary, to the terrain of desolation where ruined cities crumble and strange cries answer each other over broken stones. You send them where no one wants to dwell, because sin itself feels like that. It breaks fellowship the way jackals occupy a silent courtyard. It makes a human life feel abandoned from the inside. It drives people from each other, from worship, from peace, from the center where things are rightly ordered. Of course, it is pictured as going outward. Of course, it is loaded onto a living creature and shoved toward the geography of curse. That is where disorder belongs. Inside the camp, holiness gathers. Outside, the leftovers of chaos wait, not politely. They wait in the form of ruin and dryness and all the old names for haunted emptiness. They wait in ravines where the sun strikes hard at noon and vanishes too early at dusk. They wait in the remains of cities where dust lies on thresholds nobody has crossed in years. They wait where wild animals breed among toppled stones and nobody sane volunteers to spend the night. So you stand at the edge once more and feel the emotional electricity of that border. Behind you is arrangement, covenant, worship, bread, family, and the possibility of cleanness restored. Before you is wasteland, banishment, stray bones, thorn scrub, and the kind of silence that makes your scalp tighten. One side says life can be ordered around the presence of God. The other says everything falls apart if left to itself long enough. That is the world the goat walks into. Not a backdrop, a verdict, not scenic desert, moral distance made visible. And when the people watch it go, disappearing into that harsh brightness where camp smoke cannot be seen and human voices do not carry, they are not merely watching an animal leave. They are watching the burden pass out of the realm of home and into the realm of no return, into the old rough country where blessing does not build houses, where chaos prowls the edges, and where the wilderness keeps what it is given. So after all of that, the smoke, the silence, the poor goat, what were the storytellers trying to tell us? Basically, human evil is not a tiny private mood you keep tucked in your chest like a folded receipt. It spreads, it clings, it gets on things, it gets between people. It settles into a community the way dust settles into wool, hair, bread dough, nostrils, and absolutely every crack in your house, no matter how often you sweep. That was the first big point of the day. Sin was not treated like a bad thought you could just walk off. It was more like contamination. Not because every mistake was identical, but because wrongdoing damaged the life people shared together. Lies, violence, greed, betrayal, carelessness, rebellion, all of it left a residue. Families felt it, neighbors felt it, worship felt it. The camp itself, packed with cooking fires and sheep smell and human tempers, carried the weight of it. That is why the whole day felt so heavy. Not dramatic for fun, not weird, because ancient people were bored and needed better hobbies. The pressure was there because everybody knew life together gets fouled up. Resentment festers. Blood is shed. Promises get broken. People become unclean in body and spirit. And nobody can live forever with that piling up in the middle of home like a trash heap in summer. So the Day of Atonement did something astonishing. It said, God was not ignoring the mess, and God was not leaving the people buried under it. A way had been made to deal with what they could not scrub out by themselves. You could wash your hands. You could wash your clothes. You could bathe until your skin turned into a raisin. But guilt is stubborn. Shame is clingy. Some stains laugh at soap. That is where the two goats come in. And what a strange pair they are. Same dusty coats, same twitchy ears, same general goat energy, which is to say, suspicious, unhelpful, and deeply unserious. Yet their jobs split in two directions, and that split matters. One goat is given over in sacrifice before God. The other carries the confessed wrongs away into the wilderness. Together they say something one goat alone could not say. Wrongdoing has to be dealt with before holiness, and wrongdoing also has to be removed from the people. Covered, yes, but also carried off, addressed at the center and expelled to the edge. The ritual is doing both things at once, because human beings need both things at once. We need forgiveness and we need release. We need to know guilt is answered, and we need to know it is not staying in the house. That moment when the high priest puts both hands on the living goat is the emotional center of the whole business. Because now the burden gets named. Not hidden under ceremony. Not politely blurred into a vague sense that everyone has room for growth. No, this is the part where the failures of a nation are spoken aloud over a breathing animal that did absolutely nothing to deserve this performance review from hell. And by speaking them, the people are forced to face them. Evil is not denied. It is confessed. That matters. You cannot send away what you refuse to name. You cannot heal a wound while insisting it is a decorative feature. The ritual gives the people a way to say, yes, this is real. Yes, it is ours. And yes, we need God to remove it because we are not strong enough to carry it forever. There is mercy in that honesty. Then comes the long walk out. And that walk tells you another part of the meaning. The sins are not merely forgiven in some invisible, floaty way. They are pictured as leaving. They go beyond the camp, beyond the place of tents, cooking smoke, babies crying, old men arguing, and women grinding grain until their shoulders feel like gravel. They go where blessing does not build a home. They go to the dry places. That is why the wilderness matters so much. The desert is the visual aid. It is the opposite of ordered life. No walls, no wells you trust, no neighbors, no bread ovens, no lamp glow through tent cloth, just heat, ravines, thorns, rock, and the sense that if your sandal breaks out here, your day is about to become a very serious conversation with mortality. Sending the goat there means the disorder of the people is being put back where disorder belongs. Not in the sanctuary, not in the camp, not tucked under the family rug, far away. And then there is Azazel, that wonderfully unsettling name hanging over the whole ritual like a cracked sign over a bad road. Where the people imagined a demon, a cursed place, a wilderness power, or some thrilling combination of all three, the emotional point lands in the same place. The goat is sent into the realm outside human order, into the zone of desolation, into the place that feels like exile wears a face there. In other words, the burden is not staying with the people. That is the comfort inside all the strangeness. Ancient comfort can look odd to modern eyes. A lot of blood, a lot of smoke, a lot of waiting around while one goat gets promoted to cosmic garbage truck. But the comfort is real. God provides a way for corruption to be taken seriously without letting it have the final word at the center of communal life. Even those later traditions we wandered through carry that same ache. People started adding cliffs, scarlet threads, checkpoints, and a level of procedural anxiety that feels very much like ancient committee work. Why? Because they desperately wanted the removal to stick. They did not want sin casually trotting back into camp by sunset, like a goat who forgot its phone charger. They wanted certainty. Gone means gone. That instinct makes perfect sense. People know how quickly old wrongs return. Shame comes back. Violence comes back. Temptation comes back. The past has a talent for reappearing at the door right when you think you have finally cleaned the place. So later generations leaned hard into the image of no return. Not because they missed the point, but because they felt it so deeply. And the point, after all the dust and priestly stress and wilderness dread, is this. God does not ask people to pretend they are clean when they are not. God also does not ask them to carry their pollution forever. That is the balance holding the whole ritual together. Sin is real. It ruins things. It dirties worship, relationships, and the inner life of a people. But God, in mercy, creates a way to bring it out, confess it, deal with it, and send it away from the place where life is meant to flourish. The camp can breathe again. The center can be clean again. People can return to one another without the whole community collapsing under accumulated filth of heart and deed. So the strange day with the 2 goats was never only about one baffled animal in a bad situation. It was about restoration, about the possibility that a stained people could remain a people, about the hope that what has gone wrong does not have to live forever in the middle of home. And that is why the image endured. One creature burdened with everything foul, moving farther and farther from the camp until the human voices fade and only the wilderness remains. It is a hard image, a haunting one, but also a merciful one. Because it says the uncleanness is not denied, and it is not cherished, and it is not allowed to build a nest among the tents. It is taken away, far from the holy place, far from the families, far from the center where life is meant to continue. And once you feel that, the whole strange ritual settles into place. Not tidy, exactly. Ancient worship rarely is. It smells too much like blood and wool and hot stone for tidy. But it is clear. The burden must be named. The burden must be carried. The burden must go where the people do not. So the camp can remain. So worship can remain. So life, fragile and noisy and human, can go on. And back in the camp, with the goat gone, the air feels different. You feel it more than hear it. The shoulders around you drop. The tight mouths loosen. Somebody coughs. A child who has been shushed into near non-existence for hours finally makes a noise and does not get immediately hushed into the underworld. The whole place had been holding itself like a clenched jaw, and now, at last, it slackens. The evening light starts going soft over the tents. Not cool yet. Ancient deserts do not hand out comfort that easily. But the murderous brightness eases off, and the hard edges of everything begin to blur a little. Linen stirs in the wind. Smoke from cooking fires lifts in thin threads. Dust settles on feet, hems, hair, lashes, the eternal national moisturizer of the Near East. People begin to move like ordinary people again. A woman adjusts the water jar on her hip and heads home. An old man finally sits down with a dramatic groan of somebody whose knees have been filing complaints for decades. Somewhere, a pot lid clatters. Somewhere else, a goat that was not involved in any sacred crisis today complains at full volume because goats remain committed to making every moment about themselves. But out beyond the last tents, beyond the trampled paths and the last scraps of camp noise, one set of footsteps is fading. You can almost follow them in your mind. Sandal on stone, stone on dust. Dust on dry ground so cracked it looks like old pottery. The man goes out and the goat goes out, and the wilderness receives them the way it receives everything, without comment, without comfort, without a shred of hospitality. That is what makes the image stay with you. Not spectacle, not blood. Not even the weirdness of hearing a name like Azazel dropped into the middle of holy ritual like a scorpion in a bread basket. It is the leaving. One burdened creature getting smaller and smaller against the land until distance swallows shape, and shape becomes movement, and movement becomes nothing you can see. Just gone. Back in the camp, the ordinary work of evening resumes. Fires are fed. Water is poured. Hands, dusty and cracked and still a little shaky, find tasks they know. Home reassembles itself around familiar sounds. Grinding stone, low voices, a baby fussing, someone clearing a throat with all the delicacy of a collapsing wall. After a day like this, ordinary sounds feel expensive. The sanctuary still smells like smoke, blood, hot metal, and singed hair. That never really becomes pleasant. You just stop acting surprised. But even there, the strain has shifted. The danger has passed. The service is done. Nobody drops dead. Nobody screams. Nobody has to chase a guilt-loaded goat back from demon country because it got distracted by a shrub. That counts as a successful day. Night keeps coming. The sky deepens over the camp. First gold, then red, then the bruised blue that arrives just before the first stars prick through. Wind slides over the ground and lifts the edge of tent cloth. Somewhere on the perimeter, a watchman stands with spear in hand, staring out at the places people do not sleep on purpose. The wilderness is still there. It has not become friendly because one ritual went well. The ravines are still dark. The thorn scrub is still waiting to rip your ankles open. The rocks still hold heat long after sunset, like they are personally offended by the concept of evening. Whatever people imagine out there, desolation, danger, old rebel powers, things with too many teeth or not enough mercy, none of it has turned into a garden. But now it is farther away. That is the comfort. Not that the waste places vanished. Not that evil ceased to exist forever by supper. Not that human hearts suddenly became tidy little polished rooms. Absolutely not. Put a few hundred people together in close quarters with hunger, livestock, family grievances, and no plumbing, and the moral situation remains ongoing. Still, for this night, the burden has gone beyond the boundary, and people remember that. They remember it for generations after the camp itself changes. After tents become houses, after sanctuaries rise and fall, after priests age, die, and are replaced by younger men trying not to look terrified in ceremonial linen. The image remains, one creature carrying away what should not stay, It lingers in language. Even long after the stones of the temple are broken and scattered, people still reach for that picture when they need to name the old human habit of putting blame somewhere else. The word survives. The goat survives. Poor beast. It wanders through memory burdened forever, the most famous animal in ancient religion to get stuck with everybody else's problems. A career move nobody would choose. And yet the deeper memory lasts too. Not only blame, but removal. Not only accusation, but release. Somewhere in the bones of the image is that old ache for a clean center, for a home not rotting under accumulated guilt, for a way to say the filth is real and also no longer welcome here. So, the years pass. Empires stomp through the land in their boots and armor and administrative paperwork. Languages shift. Armies burn things. Builders rebuild them. Families tell old stories by lamplight while oil pops in the dish and smoke stains the ceiling black. Children hear about the day 2 goats stood in the sanctuary court, and one of them walked into the wasteland carrying a nation's confessed ruin. And they do not forget it. Maybe that is because the picture is so strange. Ancient faith has a gift for refusing to be tasteful. It gives you dust, blood, smoke, live animals, trembling hands, and one deeply unfortunate goat heading into the kind of landscape that makes your soul itch. Nothing sleek about it, nothing polished. It is too raw for that. Maybe that is why it endures. You can see it too clearly. You can see the twitching ears, the shifting hooves, the hands on its head, the faces in the camp as it disappears, the way evening comes afterward, ordinary and miraculous at once. Bread still needs baking. Children still need feeding. Old arguments will return. New sins will appear right on schedule because humanity has never once failed to produce fresh material. But for one evening, peace settles over the tents. Not perfect peace. Not the kind that erases memory. The kind that arrives after burden has been carried off and the ground under your feet feels inhabitable again. The kind that lets a camp lie down under the dark with a little less fear inside it. Far off, the wilderness keeps its secrets. Closer in, lamps glow one by one. The wind moves over the boundary stones, over the paths, over the places where the day's footprints still mark the dust. Out there, beyond sight, beyond the last watchfire, beyond the places where names are spoken and homes are kept, the creature is gone into the empty land. And the image remains. It remains when the altar is cold. It remains when the priests are gone. It remains when the people themselves are scattered and gathered and scattered again. One burdened animal moving out where the wild things live, carrying what the camp cannot keep, until human voices fade behind it and only the wasteland answers. Strange, severe, unforgettable. And somewhere beyond the ring of firelight, beyond the last murmurs of the settling camp, the footsteps disappear, the night deepens, and the story goes on.